In this video, we're going to show you to replace the control arm bushing on your Jeep Grand Cherokee located in the upper rear control arm. We're going to use our socket here with our breaker bar. We're going to use a 21 millimeter socket. And we want to get that on top. And we did spray it down with some rust penetrant. Get our 21 millimeter socket on there. And we're going to see if we can break this nut free. Now we're not going to remove this nut yet. At this point here, we have the rear suspension hanging. We do not want to remove this completely in case a ball joint should pop. We don't want this rear end come swinging down or causing any issues. So what we're going to do is we're just going to loosen this nut. And then we're going to support the rear differential. You can use your jack. In our case, we're going to use our pole jacks on our lift. Now we have our jack underneath the rear differential. I'm just going to raise this up just a little bit. I'm not going to fully compress the suspension, but I want to take some of the preload off of that suspension here. Okay, with that supported, I'm going to go ahead and continue to remove that center nut. Loosen and remove these two 10 millimeter bolts securing our brake line. Remove the e-brake cables. Do that on the passenger side as well as the driver's side. At this point here, let's go ahead and try and separate this ball joint. You can try a pry bar. Try and pop that off. You can try using a hammer while you're doing this in conjunction to try and shock it to break it free. Now we had tried separating our ball joint from our upper control arm, and ours is pretty rusted. We cannot separate it without damaging our upper control arm. At this point, we're going to remove the upper control arm with the ball joint. We'll separate that on the bench, reinstall a new ball joint at that time there, and then install the upper control arm. On the top here, we're going to use a 21 millimeter box wrench to go ahead and loosen the 3 bolts on the top holding our ball joint to the differential. Now once you have these 3 broken free, it'll be ideal if you have a gear wrench or ratchet wrench or something like that to go ahead and start zipping these out. Now when we're removing these bolts here, you have to be careful because there's minimal amount of clearance between the bolt and the upper control arm. If you're using a gear wrench, it is not reversible unless you flip it. You can easily get your wrench stuck between the upper control arm and the bolt. So if you undo this bolt a few threads, go to the other outside bolt, undo that a few threads, and continue to do this, you have the flexibility of this ball joint plate to move, allowing you to move this. Now at this point here, before we remove these two back bolts, we're now going to go ahead, loosen and remove the two outer bolts on the control arm itself. Now on our upper control arm, loosen and remove the 15mm bolt. Repeat for the passenger side. Go ahead and lower our jack a little bit here. That's going to allow the upper control arm to separate from the rear diff. Let's go ahead and finish removing these bolts. Now we switched over to an open-ended wrench. So you just go ahead and get in there and zip these out quickly. With the ball joint unbolted from the differential, go ahead and remove this. Might be able to use a hammer to go ahead and tap this back. Once that's separated from the chassis, we'll go ahead and work this around our brake lines and brackets. Now we have two blocks underneath to support our upper control arm. We're gonna go ahead and hit here and knock our ball joint out from up top. Now our bushing itself is pressed into the control arm itself. This is the new component, and it's going to press in from the bottom. We want to go ahead and remove this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use our air hammer and work around the edge here, and they will punch us right out through the other side. Make sure you're wearing eye protection as well as ear protection when doing this job. Now with the other side already rolled in, I'm going to go ahead and we had to flip this here. I'm going to work on this side here and pop it up and out. Once you get that bushing out, we're going to use some sandpaper. This is just 120 grit sandpaper. We're going to clean the inside of the control arm here. Make sure this is free of any defects or scaly rust, anything like that. Now is the perfect time to actually check the quality or the condition of the control arm. You don't want to press a new bushing in and have something rot on you when it falls apart anyways. Ours looks like it's in really good condition, besides having some surface rust on it. Now we install our new bushing on the other side of our control arm here. You want to make sure that the bushing is oriented the correct way. You can see how the two flat sections are facing forward and back. Same thing with this one here. When we push it in, we want to make sure it's in the same position. You don't want it positioned that way or crooked, so we're going to make sure we install it that way there. Now pressing this in, you want to make sure that you have another component that is on the top, pressing on the outer edge of our bushing to work that in. Push that in until it's fully seated and locked into place. Now that we have this one installed, you can go ahead and repeat for the other bushing on the other side and then install the control arm. Get your ball joint up in a position. We went ahead and cleaned the threads on our bolts. We're going to apply some blue Loctite to the threads of these bolts. Once we get these started, we're going to go ahead and tighten those down. Let's go ahead and torque down the 3 bolts to 100 foot-pounds. Go ahead and put your control arm back up and in. And wiggle our control arm to get our bushings into the frame. You get it to a certain point, then we'll use a mallet or a dead blow hammer. We can go ahead and tap this in. We're using a pry tool here, or you can use a small screwdriver. Pretty much kind of put it in the pilot hole here for the frame bracket. Insert that in. We're going to install the first bolt. We went ahead and wire brushed the threads. And we'll put in some anti-seize compound on the threads. Once we have that caught a couple threads, we're going to use our socket and we're just going to thread it in a few more threads to secure it into place. We'll install our passenger side bolt. I want to snug that down, and then we're going to repeat for the driver's side. We're going to go ahead and snug that down. Torque down the control arm bolts to 74 foot-pounds. On the ball joint here, we're just going to go ahead and tap that back to get that to line up. We're going to raise our pole jack, lifting up the rear differential. Install the nut on the top side. Get that started a few threads. Let's go ahead and snug that down. We're using a 15/16 socket. Now with that nut snug, let's go ahead and torque that to 105 foot-pounds. Install your brake line. Line up the bracket with the rubber grommet and work that into place. Do the same on the other side. Go ahead and lower your jack. Or if you're using your jack stands, you can go ahead and remove your jack stands and remove or lower the vehicle down. Once your vehicle is on the ground, you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.